calling myself the producer of the Gutterblood talk show. It's freaking me out. And I'm not going to blurt on too much tonight because we got to get going. We have a lot of stuff to do. I'm sort of talking to those guys there in IG. Can you all hear me? Far out. Okay. So anyway, in IG land, welcome to the Gutterblood talk show. This is DIY. It's basically me. I do have quite a few people to thank, but it's mainly DIY. So I am fundraising. So if any of you out there love what you see or you care about what's going on, you can donate by going to gutterbloodonthewall.com. There's a donation button. You can also become a member. I have a With Friends platform now. You can become a member if you're in Austin, which means that depending on the level, you can come and bring your friends. And then also I have I didn't bring it up with me, but there's an edition that I made with the first 5 artists that I showed. Including myself, there's 6 people, and it's a beautiful edition. Each artist made a different multiple. You can read all about that and see all of it on the website. So I encourage you to do that if you like what you see and you want to be supportive about it. And then you guys already listened to what I said. So I'm just going to jump right into it with my thank yous and get off the stage and let Kevin take it over. First of all, I'd like to thank Kevin. When I'm nervous, I forget my own name. But anyway, I also need to thank Rita up here. Rita! I wouldn't be able to do any of this without her. She's been with me from the beginning when I got this crazy idea. Half the stuff in this room is hers. Sometimes we build a stage out of things. She's my next door neighbor right next door. I did start the Gutterblood on the Wall series, 2019, I think. It was like 2 days before the shutdown. But Rita is actually one of the first people that I showed, but she has helped me out all the time. And then when I got the crazy idea for this, she has helped me out, and I would not ever be able to do it without her. So I call her the vice president. And then we have, I've really got and I hope I don't. I went on Google to practice your last name.
You can just leave it alone. It's fine.
Okay, I'll just say Christos.
Yeah, there it is.
Christos. Man, it's only lightning.
Back there. These guys are deliciously and actually get decent footage rather than my iPhone 7. And I'm really, really grateful. I want to thank Jamie Poole for Jamie was the first panel, as was Kevin, as was Jill over there. I want to thank Jill. So it's slowly grown out. We meet and we talk. Jill did a talk show last time where we talked about art collecting in Austin, Texas. I'll back up really quick, just for these guys up here. The Gutterblood talk show is an experiment in seeding candid dialogue, and I've memorized my byline. Seeding candid dialogue about the state of the Austin art scene, the Austin art ecosystem as the city rapidly gentrifies. So it's an open public forum and for people who care about what's going on in a very, very diverse and wide community. So that's what that is. Who else? Emily Lee over here. She gives me moral support and a really fantastic hug every time I need one. And then I also have to thank, they're not here, but I have to thank Neighborhood Reuses, which my neighbor right across the street. Does do things to make my makeshift kind of crazy sets, whatever I need. She's really lovely, and if you need toys or school supplies or even art supplies or anything else, she's a burgeoning business and she's very passionate about reuse in Austin. So go with her if you can. So I'm going to shut up now, and you guys can
All right. Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Sono.
Sono did a little bit of fundraising for herself, but I just want to say that if you do decide to give any money to Gutterblood, like that doesn't go into Sono's pocket. Look around. This is all Sono. This is all coming out of her pocket, and it just makes a better Gutterblood for the future.
Thank you, Sono.
It's pretty cool. I mean, these types of events are what makes an art community, and it's what makes any type of community. There's no reason for this other than community and sharing information and knowledge and friendship. And, that brings me to thanking these guys who all agreed to be here. These guys too are also not spokespersons for Microsoft or sitting on the board somewhere. So this conversation, I think, can turn some people off and be scary to other people, traditional artists and people who aren't familiar with tech and AI, but that's what this conversation is about. It's about making it okay. And let's see if I've, the other thing that I'm gonna say is, speaking of just being suspicious of AI and tech, Sono asked me to do this conversation. This was not my idea. I was honestly, a little suspicious myself. And for the past 5 or 6 months, I've just been learning, talking to guys like this, and it has become much less scary and much more creative and just better in every way. And I hope that as a result of this panel, you guys will feel similarly and feel encouraged to explore the space a little bit more. So there's plenty to say, but I'll just start introducing the panelists here. And we've just, there's so much to talk about in this panel. Trying to keep it short is going to be a challenge, but I do invite all of you to raise your hand if you feel like you need to say something or ask something. If I don't call on you, don't take it as like a personal burn. But there's just a lot to get through. So first we've got Matt Miller.
Hi.
So, Matt has come down from Dallas, so he is the furthest traveling panelist, and he's going to be catching an early morning flight back to Dallas. So thank you for the bus. So
I misspoke when I said flight earlier.
Catching an early bus. Matt has a background as an artist and has always been interested in the arts, but
I'm actually not an artist, but yeah,
photographer.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess
and,
hobby.
Yeah, you've got a background in the arts and a genuine interest in the arts first. Currently, he's serving as an investment analyst for a company called Metaversal, which is a startup. And I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit further, but helping this big startup collect and invest in emerging artists, specifically working in the tech space. Lisa B. Woods is an Austin-based artist who practices in interactive digital art, projection mapping, sculpture, and Lisa has a long history of bringing the tech and art crowds in Austin together and setting up meetups for these two worlds to come together. Just the other day, a few weeks ago, launched And, which is another studio space in East Austin that's dedicated to specifically female artists who are interested in the intersection of art, science, tech, and social practice. And then we've got Tyler Hobbs, who is also Austin-based, and a generative artist, coder, and painter, and recently had exhibitions at Pace and Unit London, and is just really on the cutting edge of the whole space that we're about to dive into. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah. We will get started. We'll just go down the line. And, this is such a sort of wide-ranging conversation that I want to start with just some basic definitions, and just sort of a warm-up. So first, we'll start with you, Matt. How did you get interested in the field that you're currently interested in?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like pretty random, to be honest, but like you mentioned, I kind of started my journey into art by doing photography at a very young age. That was kind of like my gateway into being interested in art more broadly. So I've always been very passionate about art and, you know, learning more about it and collecting it to some degree. But when COVID happened, I was working in real estate, and that all kind of came to a halt. So I kind of started poking around the internet quite a bit, and that basically led me to discover generative art, which is, you know, Tyler can explain it a lot better than I can, but it's art that's made with code. And, you know, when you see COVID happening and our whole society going way more digital, like everything's online now, like there's no in-person interactions, it kind of made me realize, like, now that we have this mechanism for digital ownership, that you could see digital art becoming, like, you know, a prominent thing, especially as these younger generations kind of get older and that becomes normal for them. And so that was kind of led me down the rabbit hole of collecting. Tyler was one of the first artists I came across, and he wrote an essay that was like really amazing and kind of brought all these points to light, you know, about how, you know, coding is like this toolkit that our whole society is built on, and, you know, it makes a lot of sense that our art could be built with code as well. And so that was kind of like where I kind of started getting really interested in this space, and, you know, I kind of started diving deeper down the rabbit hole to the point where I wanted to be involved in this full time. And so now I'm kind of in charge of building out a collection, investing in emerging artists, and kind of helping support their careers moving forward. So it's a little bit of where I'm at now and how I got there.
Yeah. Thank you. Lisa, how did you get started?
How did I get started? My introduction was, so I began as a designer. Life as a designer. I was a graphic designer, and I was introduced to tech art in graduate school, San Francisco, about 2011. And San Francisco was a hub of all things digital at the time. I didn't know it then, kind of going into grad school. And I just fell in love. I fell in love with how technology and art and ideas can kind of combine to make tools, which is what, you know, normally designers do, but also how to make experiences and kind of say things that I didn't see any other artwork kind of doing. And so, yeah, since then it's just been a passion. I still worked as a designer for many years. As Matt mentioned, as Kevin mentioned, I came back to Austin and was like, where are all my people, right? Like, we are a tech city, we're a creative city. We are a very giving and like warm like art community. And I was looking for where were all the people that would be interested in the same thing, because I saw the ecosystem thriving in San Francisco. And then Austin was just a different beast. Like, we have much more, we have a lot of diversity, but very siloed groups. So there's the film industry, and there's the tech industry, and there's the art industry, but rarely those things intersect. And so then it kind of became my mission, I guess, to combine those things. And so that became, as you mentioned, first a meetup, and then a school called Data Geek. So kind of trying to bring instructors and teachers and students and people interested kind of together. Since then, I've decided to focus on my own practice, because I did that for many years to try to build a community, and decided to kind of focus more on the work that I wanted to do. And so currently, I create tech art, and I opened up a studio so where I can do work, but also work alongside other kind of creatives who are interested in similar intersections of, you know, as you mentioned, public art, tech art, social practice, that sort of thing.
Tyler?
I guess I started more as a traditional artist. As you know, grew up drawing and painting. It was always a really big interest of mine. If it had been up to just my preferences, I probably would have gone to art school after high school and studied, you know, studio art. But my dad is a more pragmatic person, let's say, and he strongly encouraged me not to do that. And so I ended up studying computer science, which was something that I also had an interest in. So I went to UT, got a degree in computer science, started working as a software engineer at some local tech startups, and at the same time continued my art practice just as a hobby. But you know, knew that I wanted to take that more seriously, and in my mid-20s started spending more and more of my time focusing on artwork, and still working very traditionally, a lot of figure drawing, but eventually decided that I needed to find a way to merge my two worlds of programming and artwork, and so started trying to write programs that created paintings. That was my original thought, and that kind of helped me stumble into the world of generative art, which really captivated me right away. This was about 10 years ago, and since then that's been my primary focus.
So
Tyler doesn't remember, but we tried to recruit him for Data Geek.
That's what it was. Yeah, no, I remember that. I remember
And he's
part
just
of
like,
it.
I think I've met you before. And I'm like, oh, I remember
Yeah.
you very well. We approached him many times, and his answer was always like, I'm focusing on my work. And I'm like, respect,
Yes.
man.
Thank you.
it's a good choice.
Yeah. It's a hard choice sometimes to make, but yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
I was going to make this a kind of a group project question, but I think it makes maybe most sense for you to help us explain the difference between AI art and generative art.
Yeah, sure.
And what are the similarities, and
Yeah.
then maybe, really describing what your process looks like.
Sure, absolutely. So I'll have to define a few things. I'd say, let me define generative art in the biggest bubble way possible first, which is generative art is just the practice of creating artwork through systems, through processes, in such a way that the artist gives up some amount of control over the work and turns over some of the work to that system or process or randomness. They give up something, some amount of control, but they get back something in terms of the process can often lead to interesting or surprising results. And maybe we'll get to cover some of the details of that. So in a way, what I do is like a specific type of generative art, and AI art is also another type of generative art, what you might call algorithmic art, if you want to be really specific. And that just means that I'm working through code that I'm writing myself. So I'm crafting an algorithm, maybe even a little bit. I'll pull up some code to show you or something. I should have done that, just so you have an idea. But if you imagine like a stereotypical hacker scene in a movie, like the green text on the black background, it's like that kind of thing. That's what I'm looking at. And then the program generates imagery, visual art, and I'll show. This is just a couple of examples. So really, the programs are designed not just to produce exactly one image, but to produce a lot of images. They work heavily with randomness. Randomness is a very integral part of the algorithm, and so every output from the algorithm will be different. And so sometimes I make algorithms that can generate a really large amount of artwork. So this program generated 999 works, and so you're just seeing a dozen of them here, but that's the kind of thing that I tend to work with. So AI art is also generative in the sense that the artist doesn't have complete control over the entire process. They're turning over some creative agency to some third-party system. A few big differences about AI art. First of all, in my work, I'm not training the algorithm on anything. There's no input. It's just what's contained within the algorithm. Everything that it generates is fully from the code. With AI art, this is a much more complex algorithm written by somebody like Google or another, really legit engineering organization. Yeah, I'm not just one standalone coder. And AI art is trained on thousands or more often millions of images. So there's a lot of attention paid to the input to AI and how that's trained. The closest thing I've got here is this piece. This is in the MoMA. This is an artist, Rafiq Anadol, who's an amazing artist. His work is based on more of an AI system. So it's based on training on a lot of data, and it just tends to produce very different results from the kind of work that I do. But both are more broadly speaking generative art. Often when you'll hear us say the term generative art, we're referring more to algorithmic art, like the kind of work that I make. And if we want to talk about AI art, we'll usually use that phrase more specifically instead.
I want to pause here and just mention too, which is something that I should have mentioned from the beginning, but this conversation started out as my research into what is AI art, and then it just got very complex. There aren't a lot of artists out there in the world who are making imagery with AI and calling themselves. I'm an artist, specifically using AI art. And I also just want to mention that in just what Tyler said, we can all recognize that there's so many questions to dive into. And this conversation is going to have to take a specific shape. But I do, I will say again, please raise your hand at any point, and maybe we can answer some questions.
Can I interject a little bit? I
Yeah,
just want to
absolutely,
say for the more traditional painters, like Sol DeWitt,
Yeah.
he could be considered an algorithmic
Art
creator,
generator,
right?
yeah.
Because he
Yeah.
created the instructions. So like, although what we're talking about is in the realm of digital, right? It doesn't really have to be. Like I think
Absolutely.
generative art predates computers, really.
Yeah.
in some ways.
Handwritten code.
Yeah.
Handwritten
Handwritten,
code.
Yeah.
hand-typed instructions, right? And there was no machine involved, and I mean, maybe the typewriter is a machine, and then or is a machine, and then the person would draw, lines. So I just wanted to
Yeah.
add that in there to give it some art historical context too.
Absolutely.
This doesn't just appear fully grown out of,
Yes.
the digital age. I think it has precedence in our
Yeah.
history. which we can
Fantastic
recognize.
point. You can trace a lot of this in many ways back in time, but another good reference is like textiles and fabric art. So machines for weaving. This is actually the origin of computers. They came out of these programmable looms in like the 1880s. So the use of algorithms to design artwork goes back a long ways. We can even get more esoteric than that, but we won't.
Small
Yeah, just to
illustration.
say, yeah, Sol DeWitt or even artists like Mondrian, like you can make a lot of connections to generative art, even completely ignoring explicit code.
Yeah. And the outcomes don't have to be visual. They could be sound. They could be text. Right? Like AI has lots of different modalities, and so it could be, motion. It doesn't have to be just visuals.
Yeah, great point.
And to step away from AI and generative art, Lisa, you're an artist who you use technology, but your artwork isn't about investigating that technology the same way that Tyler is investigating the actual sort of medium. And you use tech to sort of translate the ideas that you're interested in. And how is that really different, and do you see yourself in that same world, or is it completely different?
I'm going to see myself in the same world. I'm going to draw a bigger circle around your circle. So I'm going to make a bigger circle, which I'm going to call tech art or computer art. People call it new media art. I'm going to draw a big circle, and that really could be defined as any artwork that uses electronics or digital medium for either the process or kind of thing it's investigating. Of course, those really fuzzy edges, right? Because if you create a film and you project it on a video, is that tech art? Probably not. So I think the technology has to be integral to what the art is trying to say at some level, although it doesn't have to be art about technology per se. Because and I think the reason it's so hard to draw the circle around tech art is that everything's a tool, right? Like a painter's ink or a painter's brush is a tool, right? The canvas is a tool. All these things are things that people have invented to make whatever they're going to do. And so where the tools, become technology is kind of a fuzzy edge, and it's always expanding. And so I'm going to draw a big circle called tech art and put myself in there. And I'm not a great coder. Like my background is visual and design, and I had a boss that said that technology ate the world, right? Which I think kind of has happened. Like every industry you could be in, including art, is probably a tech business in some way or tech industry. But I use, electronics. So like on the bottom right there, I have a piece that uses motors and sensors. I've used digital fabrication processes like the bottom middle, which is etching acrylic and using LED lights. I've used prefabricated motors, so the tree in the upper center is a thing I bought from Home Depot, but it made the point that I wanted to make. So I don't necessarily have to craft all of the kind of tech objects myself. I feel like they're integral to the artwork and what they're trying to say. And often, actually, especially recently, I am really commenting on technology writ large. Like I'm interested in like agriculture and how center pivot irrigation machines and artificial pollination and just like general mechanization of agriculture is really impacting society and land and possibly and also the climate. So it's like I think I have a fuzzy edge between. It always involves technology in some way. Either I'm thinking about technology or I'm using technology. Usually it's a combination of both.
Yeah. You mentioned your agricultural project. Would you just describe sort of where the tech comes in to that?
Yeah, so that's a work in progress. So I was curious, as I mentioned, about a technology called center pivot irrigation. So if you fly over the country and see those circles, that's what's happening. Like they're getting irrigated in the circular pattern. I thought that was interesting. One way to express that with tech art that I'm working on is to create a drawing machine that basically mimics that kind of motion of something moving in a circular way and adding water and kind of drawing. So I feel like in some way these machines are these massive drawing machines, right? We think of like land art and making very massive artwork with the land. I think these are unintentionally making really interesting patterns on the earth. And so like that's where I think I look at technology as something that's impacting society and critiquing it in some ways, and also trying to apply simple motors, simple pencils, simple water systems to create something that reflects and is a new thing.
Nice, thank you. And Matt, so now we've covered these two related but separate sort of umbrellas of tech art. Which one are you interested in? What is Metaversal Collect? What is your sort of expertise in?
Well, for us, we kind of have to collect NFTs because, we're a digitally native company, and this is like the digitally native way of owning things. But I'm interested in all of it, but I think there's so much innovation happening at such a rapid pace. It's really hard to like kind of decide, what's good art and what's, kind of lazy art for lack of a better word right now, because the thing is like AI is like evolving at such a breakneck speed. Like even the toolkit that's available today compared to what was available 2 months ago is like vastly different, and it's just like insane to keep up with. And so it becomes very easy to make something that's aesthetically beautiful now. Like you can just type a few words into a prompt and out comes like a really beautiful visual output. So you really have to dive deeper and understand, what the artist's intent, what their process is, and, the real story behind the art before you kind of go in and collect it, which is very difficult because everything moves at such a rapid pace. You almost feel like you're gonna miss the boat if you don't collect an artist quickly enough. But you really do. That's really what differentiates you as like a good collector versus like, someone who's just chasing hype. And I think that's like the way we kind of think about approaching things.
So when you're collecting, are you reaching out to the artist directly and asking questions?
Yeah, and I think that's the most beautiful thing. I mean, like, that's even how I met Tyler, is like, just sending an artist a message on Twitter or something, and then this whole entire conversation unfolds. So like anyone in the world is now reachable. I'm talking to artists literally across the entire world, which is really, really cool, and it almost democratizes the art world in a way where, an artist in Kenya can reach an audience across the entire world now that they may not have otherwise had access to.
Nice.
I think it's really, really fascinating.
What are some of the things that you look at in collecting an artist that are maybe red flags?
Gotta be careful here. No, I think I think it's pretty like it's really. There's no like exact science to it, right? But you can generally tell from talking to someone like whether they're disingenuous or not, and whether they really have like true intent behind their art versus just trying to like cash grab, for lack of a better word, like piling into a trend. And I think that's the good thing about where this market is right now, is because it's not there was an initial kind of bubble that happened a couple years ago that was very hype driven, and I'm sure we'll probably get into this more. There's certain projects I have quite a bit of disdain for, but we'll get into that, and it kind of like set us all back quite a bit because people started lumping in all NFTs into the same bucket, where there really is this category of fine art, and there's this category of kind of just like speculation and hype driven stuff that really has no inherent value.
That never happens in the art world.
No. Never seen it before. So impressive. But yeah, I think that's really kind of the key, is just like, now that the market's kind of settled down a bit, I think it's a lot easier it's kind of acted as a filter for people who are actually here for the right reasons versus people who are just kind of here to make a quick buck, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. So open up this idea to all three of you, just because you mentioned the word like authenticity, and there's a lot of concerns with technology and the way that people use it. One of the main takeaways I want from this panel is, how can artists use this technology to make the world a better place and make the things that we interact with better. We're going to get back to the NFT world, but what can artists do to make this technology more equitable and just safer?
I'll jump in, sure. So there are some artists, Black female artists, who are thinking about the data sets, right? And so they actually are creating artwork with AI. I think we kind of defined the AI artwork, but I think there's almost two categories of it, which are artists, people who put in prompts and have an output, and that prompt can be whatever, and the output can be whatever. And I think that's one type of AI artist using these AI tools, and the other kind is the kind who will actually program their own machine learning model and then input what they want and output what they want, right? So I think one has a more bespoke technical kind of sophistication to it. The other one can be sophisticated in other ways, but is kind of a more democratic and easy to access kind of level. And so the artists I'm interested in and keeping an eye on are kind of working at that machine programming level, and they're thinking about one, either showing off the biases, right, by putting in prompts. Actually, I'll take it back. There's different kinds. The ones that make their own algorithms, and I think are using it and training it with like African American thought and literature, and then showing the difference of what the output feels like when you ask it a question, if it's trained on something different than like the general internet, for instance, right? And then there are people who are using the prefabricated tools, and they're exposing the biases by putting prompts like, Black woman laughing, and what comes out is this distorted, bizarre, creature that isn't, an African American woman, is something else that the machine can't quite parse because it doesn't have the right training data. So I think those are the people that I'm interested in. I think those problems are going to keep persisting, and I don't know how they'll be solved, but I think some artists are jumping in the fray going, we see a problem here and we're going to like expose it, and that's what their artwork is.
Nice.
Yeah, for sure. I'd say, yeah, absolutely. Like investigating the tools artistically, right? Like playing with them, looking for their particular inherent preferences or biases or skew assumptions about them. Artists are really good at finding these things and poking into them, like Lisa's talking about. I think that's a big part of it. I think as Matt kind of started to mention, like in some ways the technology at least has a great potential for being very like equitable and democratic. At least just from a pure technology perspective, it's very low cost of access and very portable, so that basically anybody that has an internet connection is able to take part in this form of art creation, and if they want to in this particular art market, which that's not true for painting, right? Painting is a lot more difficult to access in a lot of ways. You need to be able to get your hands on canvas and paints and brushes. There's a lot of technique that's involved in painting, and you probably need somebody to teach you, at least at the beginning, how to master some of that technique. It's a lot harder to sell a painting to somebody that's not in the same room with you. And so there's at least like a potential for things to be more equitable. Of course, I think everything starts out in this kind of like skewed by default arrangement, right? Like the people who come into this with privilege are the ones who are likely to initially do well. And so just like anything else, I think it takes like vigilance and constant corrective action to address these sorts of issues. But
yeah. So you mentioned earlier NFTs and collecting. You're specifically, because of your company is digital native, is what you called it?
Right.
So you're collecting on-chain or NFT. Maybe you could just describe what that means.
I'll try. Yeah, I mean, I guess just to like distill it down in its most basic sense, for the first time ever, we kind of have the ability to have like digital ownership, and that's kind of the really big unlock here, and that was kind of like the aha moment for me. And basically, like, I think it's a really interesting mechanism from a provenance standpoint as well. Like oftentimes people will say, oh, I can, take a photo of it and, it's the same thing that's, the NFT or whatever. But the fact of the matter is, like, you can now point on like a ledger that no one can fuck with, like this is where this image originated, and this is the code, and this is why generative art is especially interesting to me, is because you actually have the code that generates that image alongside it on chain. So you're kind of like owning the whole entire, I mean, I guess I'm trying to think of the best way to describe this, but I wouldn't say that you're owning the code, but you kind of have that tied to the piece as well, right?
Everything about the work and the ownership is completely transparent and completely public. Right?
Yeah, it's completely transparent. Yeah, there's a lot less opacity for sure, and I think that's something that's really compelling to me as well. Yeah.
And you brought up a word, provenance, and for those in the crowd who maybe don't have an art background, provenance is just sort of the history of the movement of a piece, and in the past it's been much more difficult to prove. So you both make different types of tech art. Maybe we can start with you. Do you make NFTs, and why do you make NFTs?
Yeah. Part of my work is made and sold with the help of NFTs. I think there's a I sell drawings and paintings as well, so it's not exclusively what I do. But to me, NFTs are really the best and really the only meaningful way to collect digital artwork right now. And there's really not an alternative that I see that's going to come into existence. Like this is really the best mechanism for collecting digital art. It's just a public ledger, right? It's just a public record of this piece of art was created by this artist, and then it got sold to this person, and now they own it. And maybe later it got resold to somebody else. It's just a public ledger, and it's helped out by cryptographic tools, so we know that it can be trusted and has nice properties, but it's all public and it's all transparent, and you can propose a lot of other models for how to own digital art, but all of them have different weaknesses, and NFTs, like the current model of collecting art on the blockchain, this is really overall the best balance of trade-offs in terms of how you might own a piece of digital artwork. And so that's part of the reason why I use them for selling digital work. It's also, I showed this collection. This actually, the blockchain and the tools associated with it actually allow for some new types of artwork, some new models of artwork. So Matt kind of described a little bit of this, but for this work, the code that I wrote that generates the artwork is written to the blockchain. So all of the code that's necessary to generate any of this artwork is completely publicly stored forever. And the way that collectors collected this particular piece of work was so I set it up so that there would be 999 of them created. The collector paid the cost of getting one of these pieces. And then the code on the blockchain was executed in one transaction to create a new piece of artwork and to give it directly to the collector. So the work was a surprise to the collector. There was no opportunity for intervention or curation by myself, by the collector, by a gallery, or anybody like that. So it's a very almost like pure form of collecting this type of algorithmic artwork. And so all 999 sold in 30 minutes, something like that. And there were suddenly 999 new pieces of artwork, and all of those collectors can point and say, this came from this algorithm, and anytime I want, I can rerun the algorithm and regenerate this image anew. So it's, these will live forever very easily. And there's ways you can build even further on top of that to involve collectors in more meaningful ways. Some of my other projects have done that. But yeah, there's actually some really fascinating mechanisms that NFTs and the blockchain unlock. It's not just a simple, owning a JPEG, right? There's a lot more possibility there. And so for me and other artists that are able to work with code and to work with the blockchain more natively, actually, there's a lot of interesting possibilities artistically as well.
Yeah, and I'll jump in and say, as a collector, participated in this project, you do feel a sense of more attachment to a piece when you're kind of a part of its creation process in a way. because like you were kind of there for its birth, and again that provenance is associated with your wallet or whatever, and so that's a weird way to phrase it, yeah. but it is really cool, and Tyler's extremely humble, and I'll say that this is extremely difficult to achieve a project like this. A lot of people have tried, especially when you're trying to produce 999 works in a very short period of time from one single algorithm. It's very difficult to achieve a bunch of unique outputs like that are all aesthetically pleasing in their own right, but also cohesive. Like that's a very, very tough balance to strike, and I think only a handful of artists have really done that well. And so like again, it's there's an extreme challenge involved with creating art like this.
And Lisa,
Can you repeat?
Yeah, I was gonna say,
the question?
do you mint your work on NFT?
I do not mint my work on NFTs.
Yeah.
I don't put it often. I mean, it may happen in the future, but it's just not where my practice is, and it doesn't really align with it currently. I do know that I went to a conference about public art, which were large, 20-year, monumental pieces, and they had a subset of that conference that was helping artists create NFTs from their work, so they can kind of very opposite types of work, not digital, like very physical and engineering heavy kind of pieces, and working with those artists conceptually to create something that was digital that would hold those pieces together, like so kind of leveraging their status as an artist in one medium and kind of porting it to another, which I thought was very interesting. So hopefully there's more of that's going on, and if I ever were to go in this direction, I think that's probably what I would look for, is someone to kind of shepherd me to like, how's the meaning from what I'm making in this realm going to transport itself into that realm. So
Nice. So already we've covered some topics that, like, we've had the opportunity to get you guys to explain it, but where did you learn about these things? What are the platforms that you interact with that you could even learn how to mention NFT, for instance? Where do you guys go?
Yeah, I get started a little bit.
Yeah, you go ahead and start. Yeah, I'll jump in.
Okay, I think there's two parts to that answer. So one is like where are the tools, and two is where is the culture, because those are separate things. So just to talk about in fact, the tools are pretty easy to find, but the culture is more interesting. The culture, for whatever reason, is mostly centered on Twitter and Discord. So Discord, for those of y'all who don't know, it's a chat application. It was originally used, I think, a lot for gaming.
Yeah.
But it started to become a nice way to build kind of community chat. So if you've used Slack, it's very much like Slack. So like, for example, I have a Discord server with a lot of fans and collectors on it. There's other, the main platforms, sort of online galleries will have their own Discord. So a lot of the conversation tends to happen there. And then, like I said, on Twitter. So if you're like just on Instagram, you actually won't see a lot of this. It's kind of strange that it's so siloed off, and I hope it doesn't stay that way. But that's just where it is.
and the Discord communities, can you join them as an outsider? Do you buy into them? Like, how do you?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, Discord, it's free and open to use. Most of these are completely open. Some of them, they'll have particular parts that are, limited to, like, some artists will do, like, if you're a collector of my work, can you, like, get into this room, which is actually kind of nice, because then as an artist you can speak to all of your collectors in one place. But most of it's all free and open to use. It's just
And even more basic, like how do you get onto Discord?
you go to discord.com.
I think you just Google Discord, and probably the first link that comes up will lead you to download it.
You can use it in the browser. You can download an app. You can put an
too.
app on your phone.
Yeah.
It's very easy.
And Discord has so many different communities in
It
it.
does.
Where would you start if you wanted to get into the art part of Discord?
Yeah, good question. I would say you're welcome to join my Discord. That's a great place. It's very friendly, but you'll only see my work really in there. Art Blocks is a really good one. So if you like generative art, if you like this kind of algorithmic art, Art Blocks is a platform that's really helped a lot of artists like myself execute this type of work. And I think at this point there's probably 200 different artists that have made projects with art blocks. So it's a much bigger community, and they'll also talk about a lot of the other. You'll see a lot of mentions of other spaces and discords from there. You can kind of it's a network. You can branch off from there.
You kind of have to go down the rabbit hole one way or another. Like, you kind of start with one artist that you may be drawn to or something, just maybe by browsing the Art Blocks website. Maybe you're drawn to a certain project, and then maybe you're led to their Twitter or something, and then from there, the algorithm kind of just starts feeding you other similar artists and people in that same kind of thing. But really, the only way is just to kind of dive down the rabbit hole and see what you're drawn to.
And you were just out in Marfa.
Yeah, so that's a really good in real life meetup for the Art Blocks community. Trying to think of a way of describing it without sounding like a complete psychopath. Like, we all go to Marfa.
It's like a digital art festival.
Yeah, it's just a good community gathering in Marfa, and I think the good thing about Marfa is like it's so remote and so far away that it kind of filters out the quality people. I think there's everyone that's there really wants to be there and like has the same intent and the same kind of long-term vision for what's being built here. And I think Eric, he's the founder of this platform, Art Blocks, did a really good job of prior to like putting this digital art presence in Marfa, getting to know the people in the community there and like understanding the existing culture that's there and not disrupting it, and rather being a part of it. And so I think it's really, really cool to kind of see how receptive, for the most part, Marfa has been towards like kind of Art Blocks and this whole digital art movement that's kind of unfolding.
Nice. And this is the Art Blocks, Discord, Twitter are all very different from where you, Lisa, sort of have your community. And where is that?
Where is my community? So since the pandemic, I started looking for tech artists, kind of out there. School for Poetic Computation out of New York is a school that's been around, I think at least 10 years now. And they really are interested in poetic computation, right? Which is like using algorithms for things that are artistic, critical, like interesting, not just, efficient and productive and, tool-based sort of thing. And they've kind of recently gone through a major culture shift there. It's very interesting the kind of classes they have. And and Discord is part of that, because once you join these online classes, what I find, especially if there's some tech art component, is then you join their Discord community, and then you're kind of, once you're in, you're always in, right? So I had a class 2 years ago, and I can still jump onto the Discord and have a conversation about if having coding issues, or where is there an exhibit to have, or, here's a picture of my cat. Like, there are different channels, obviously, but there's channels for all those things, and the pet one is real good. Another place it's small New York apartments, these little cats. The other place I've been really enjoying since the pandemic is the Alternative Art School. The Alternative Art School is not focused on tech art, but is really bringing world-class conceptual artists in 20 really small classes. So I feel like I've met people that I could never have taken. I would have to gone to Yale to have taken a class with these folks. And it's fabulous because you're online, you're on Zoom, and you're really digging into the work. And again, there's a Discord. Actually, with them, it's Mighty Networks community, so another kind of platform. Then again, so once you're in, you're in. And within that group, there's enough people there. Global, school's global, mostly U.S., but it also has some other countries involved. And they also have a channel for tech art. So I feel like I'm kind of not so much locally rooted in what's going on in tech art in Austin anymore, but have found kind of other interesting tendrils. But I would love to have local people here.
Which is, I think, why we're here today talking in the first place.
It's
you would think that there'd be like a huge tech art community in
I've always
Austin,
thought that.
and there just isn't. It's like me and Lisa and
10 other people.
10 other people who never meet up really. So yeah.
When I started this process of learning about artists in Austin, because I knew the panel would be here, it was really hard to connect with people who were making generative art and AI art and tech art, and that sort of dovetails into this idea of open source and sharing information. And what is that, and why is that something that people do?
Do you want to start or should?
Ooh, I'll let you take that one. I'll
Yeah. Okay. So open source is a concept that came out of software, and open source is the idea that you take the code for a program and you make it completely public, and furthermore, you actually solicit contributions from the public to that code. So it's a way of doing communal coding and fully open coding. And a lot of the most influential software projects have actually done this. The Linux operating system, which is used for almost every server, and Android phones and so on. This is open source software. This idea of open source, I think it started maybe in the 90s, but there was just this idea that rather than keeping these projects, secretive and special sauce and all that you could actually gain more by opening it up, and everybody who uses it will use it for a little different reason and a little different way, and they might have great ideas about how to improve it because they have a different background. Open source is about sharing. It's about communally building these resources, and it's one of the best things about being a software developer today compared to maybe 20 or 30 years ago. Fortunately, a lot of the stuff that I work with is open source. The tools for working with the graphics, these are all open source. All of the code that goes onto the blockchain is completely open source. The blockchain itself is open source. As far as I know, I think like Ethereum is completely open source. And it's really just like part of the ethos. Like even the artists are not so scared about showing their process. Some of them really embrace it. Some embrace it to a different degree than others. But for myself, I share some parts of the code, and I like to share writing. Writing is my main way of sharing ideas and explaining the concepts that have gone into my work. I think it's a more useful way to share things often than just sharing the code. But it's just part of the ethos, and it's about, I think, enabling collective reuse and sort of allowing people to collaborate in a way to build up greater things over time.
And what this means, my background is not technical per se. I was a visual person who eventually, technology ate my job. But I don't have coding background, and so when I want to make something move or make something slightly generative, not to the level that you do, I can go on processing.org, right, or P5.js, and some of these are the open source software platforms we're talking about, and there'll be loads and loads of tutorials from like the simplest, like how to make a circle move from left to right on the screen, how to make it bounce, how to make it change color, and then it can level you up. So you can do it in a very kind of computer sciencey way, like I understand every aspect of it, or like me, you can get lazy and just find a really interesting thing that someone's uploaded, which is kind of doing the thing that your idea is about. Download that code, plug it into ChatGPT, have ChatGPT explain to you every line of code, like comment every line of code so you understand what it's saying, and then fiddle until something cool comes out. So open source allows and is very happy to have all of that happen. Right, like they're okay with taking something that someone else has built and building on it, and using a combination of not necessarily ChatGPT. That is a new phenomenon, but there's forums and there's just a broad, diverse community online that will help you if you have Arduino code or processing code or P5.js and help you problem solve anything you might want to try.
Definitely.
How are we doing right now? Are there any questions? Things that we've just glazed over that, Rita?
How do you price what you sell?
It's the same challenges for any other artist. The way that, like when I was selling drawings and paintings, I tried to sell it for a certain price, and if it sold, then the next one I just raised my price a little bit, and then if that sold, then I just raised my price a little bit. So you can do the same thing with digital art.
Well, is it time?
Say again?
Seems like you have to. There'd be a lot of time with the coding and going back and forth, and just what you're talking about, playing, and is that big? Does that figure into it? Your time, how many years you've been doing it?
Yeah, it's complicated in the same way that any painter, if they had to explain their pricing, it would be complicated for them to explain, I think.
Like, so what?
Yeah.
So what would something like if you wanted to buy one of your an NFT of yours, like?
Yeah.
What does that even start at? I'm
They
just
get expensive
curious.
these days.
But these were originally not very expensive.
These were originally not very expensive. They were, I mean, they were. So they're both not expensive, and for me, it was a life-changing amount of money.
Sure.
So I sold them for like $300 each, and I was amazed that all 999 sold in 30 minutes. So
I looked this up today, and
Yeah.
I'll just say, Tyler's Fidenza project, which is the project that we're looking at, it starts at 65 ETH, right? I believe.
Yeah.
And an ETH is going for how much today?
1,700.
So 65 times
But I think
1,700.
one thing that's interesting about this digital, and it's also a little scary, is like price discovery often happens very quickly, and the market kind of dictates. Like the artist oftentimes does not have a lot of control over, what their secondary market is, really any, I guess, which led to a lot of speculation. I think that's kind of cleaned itself out a little bit to some degree here. But yeah, I think there's a lot more rapid price discovery that happens when everything's way more connected and way more accessible.
Yeah, I think I'd also say that there's a lot of really, really good artists who are selling digital work for. So normally things are priced in terms of ETH, which is the
coin.
The coin, the currency that's most compatible here. But help me convert here. 0.01 ETH to
like there's very
to 0.1 ETH.
Yeah,
right. So that's like $30 to $200. There's a lot of artists selling really good work in that range, and to me, this is still an amazing fact for digital artists. If you just think 10 years ago, who is a digital artist going to sell their work to? How many digital artists can sell something for $200? Almost none, right? It's almost, digital artists have historically had to rely almost entirely on commissions for any sort of livelihood. And so the fact that any digital artist can actually start to earn a living pretty reasonably this way, to me, is incredibly exciting and like one of the most positive developments of this entire thing. So my prices, it's kind of an outlier, not really the main thing you should look at here, but yeah.
You have a question?
I was just going to say something you kind of feel like you're glossing over is the fact that with NFTs, if someone resells them, you could also make a commission as well.
Yeah, which is great.
Really awesome.
Yeah, so
Very important.
yeah, so there's a concept of royalties. So royalties on secondary sales. So if somebody there's online marketplaces to buy and sell these, and it's very easy to do. It's very easy to make those transactions. So these are actually bought and sold much more often than paintings are, and there's a culture of paying royalties on these sales, typically somewhere in the neighborhood of 5%. So if a work is resold for $1,000, then the artist might receive $50 royalties on that sale, and it can be fantastic. It can be sort of a recurring stream of revenue for an artist. It can also mean that if an artist sells their work for a low price and it happens to go up in price a lot, that they actually share the benefit of that, which is something that happened to me, which traditionally doesn't happen so much with paintings.
Can I ask you where the other 95%, does it go to the platform or does it go to?
The platform usually takes like a 2% fee, and then the rest goes to the seller.
The original collector.
Oh, the original owner, got it.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
the secondary owner, got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah.
Can you guys talk a little bit? I think that's the thing the art world, the upper 1% has always been a way to like hoard money and basically launder money, right? And to hoard assets, right? And I think that's the thing that's interesting to me about where tech and NFTs came from with crypto, is that it was obviously a very easy way to launder money. And they had to have like a platform to do that and to kind of whitewash the money
Yeah.
was through this art form. I mean, this is like not disputed. Like this is, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
it
so
is.
like the people who are all taking
Yeah.
these fees, I mean, it's great for the artists,
Yeah.
but then underlining, and all artists have this. Like I make physical work. I
Right.
use energy to make physical work. I use
Sure.
water. I use resources. It is not ethically clean. None of it is, right?
Right.
But there's no but. But also, not but and yet we know that this platform of the other individuals who were able to kind of create this economy kind of did it, as always, on the back of artists to make it seem a little bit more accessible and open
Unified.
and clean. Exactly.
And democratic.
And democratic and prioritizing it. And that is also kind of part of it. And I mean, it's less than what kind of, Lisa, what you're doing. But, you know, that's like the other side of this. And we're already seeing, there's already been a bubble. There'll be another one. And so, like, I don't know, like, how do you...
We're gonna address this up here
It's
in a
like,
moment. I just
how
want to
do
get
you
Okay.
Annette's
Yeah.
Annette
Because
has
I
a,
wanted
I'm just curious about that.
No, but can I take a tangent off of what Tammy said? And that is that the other piece, this is fabulous for me, thanks so much for letting me be here and listen, because I've been trying to make sense out of this from my kind of mid-20th century perspective on the world. And so it's a great introduction, thank you, I've understood everything, which is amazing. But the piece that I don't get, and it's tangential to what Tammy's talking about, because to me, yeah, transactions, profiteering were all I could really see when anybody talked about this realm of making, trading, owning, even creating. Sounds really noble, but really creating the work. Where I want to get some clarification is when you own an NFT, how do you enjoy it?
well, that's exactly what I said. I wanted to ask about enjoyment. Enjoyment.
Yeah.
Do you project it on the sheet in the back of your house and admire it? I mean,
Yeah.
do you hold it in your hand? What is
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
Do you
Enjoyment.
play it at night?
Yeah, you go ahead.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed it quite a lot in my home, so.
Yeah, yeah.
But you go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm a collector as well. I definitely collect a lot of digital art in the form of NFTs. I collect a lot of paintings as well. Do you own any drawings or paintings that are not hanging on your wall but are in your closets? Yeah, I own a lot of them that are that way, and I still enjoy the fact that I own them. So in some ways you can appreciate a piece of work even if you're not seeing it every day. That's one aspect of it. A lot of the times I'll collect work as a voice of support for the artist, as a way of saying I value the fact that you created this work, and I want you to continue creating work like this, and therefore I'm going to spend my money to collect your artwork. And with that motivation, even if I'm not seeing it every day, I still sort of enjoy the fact that I've collected this work. There are lots of ways to make it physically part of your life as well. Printing is a very, very common thing in this space. So a lot of artists offer the ability to have your work, to have their work printed in a high quality way, coming from the artist studio. Sometimes there's more complicated, physical pieces of work that are tied to the NFT as well. Some people just like scrolling through the set of work that they have collected periodically.
Well, let's talk about
Depends.
your series of works that you do actually draw and paint and collaborate with the machines.
Yeah.
To make physical objects as well.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I don't just make digital art. I make drawings and paintings, and all these same ideas that you can play with digitally. It's also possible to bring these things into the physical world. So a big part of my practice is around using mechanical and robotic systems to take digital ideas and to explore them in the physical world. So often plotters, kind of a simple 2-axis robot that you can attach, a pen or a pencil or a paintbrush or any tooling you can come up with in order to craft a physical work. This ends up being a really fascinating way to work because it allows you to access a lot of types of drawing and painting that are inaccessible by the hand alone. It's a way to return to the physical world, but it also produces this really interesting mixture of these very precise and clean digital ideas with with the physical world, which is very messy and hard to control and sort of beautiful for that reason. So yeah, it's a big part of my practice.
I think tying it back to NFTs again, one thing that really appeals to me as a collector is, as like Tyler alluded to, if you kind of have ownership of the token, which you kind of can think of as almost like the certificate of authenticity or like the token of ownership. It's like kind of your deed to the piece, I guess, in a way. You can have like a super high fidelity silkscreen print of that image fabricated by the artist, signed by their studio. And if your house burns down and that high fidelity print goes down, you still have ownership of that token, and the artist can reproduce that print for you. So like the value is kind of in that digital token of ownership. Then beyond static images, there's art that you can now interact with, manipulate, and play with and change the state of it. And that's like kind of manifests itself more on digital screens. But to be honest, like the display tech isn't quite there yet. I kind of liken it to like when plasma TVs came out in like 2000 and they were $20,000 at Best Buy, but now you can get them for $50 at any Walmart. I think the same thing's going to happen here with digital displays. Like the really nice ones that are suited for these kinds of NFTs and works you can interact with are like, around that same price range, like extremely ridiculous, like in the 5-figure range. But I think over time, as that scales and demand kind of grows, then that display tech will catch up. I think digital displays are really interesting, like we saw like with the MoMA display with Rafiq's piece. Like that massive large scale thing. I think they did a study, they released some data that the average time people spend in front of a painting there is, around 30 seconds, I think. In this piece alone, the average time is 8 minutes.
Oh,
and so like
moving.
that insane. So that so there's this engaging element of this art that's dynamic and moves that hasn't really been explored before, and so I think that's really compelling to me as well.
I've got a question, I think related to what Tammy was saying, which about the kind of money laundering aspect of things. Like you were talking about, translating things from ether, I think. ETH into dollars. Like, do either of you see a time when NFTs will just be able to be purchased in dollars, and therefore will take out this whole cryptocurrency kind of like stain?
They already can,
Okay. So I think that will help kind of clean it out. I don't know if it'll clean it out. There'll still be pockets of it that are clearly about money laundering, but
to address that a little bit. So first of all, you've always been able to buy it with USD
without turning it into some kind of cryptocurrency first.
So there's something called USDC, which is a cryptocurrency, but it's balanced 1-to-1 with the US dollar, so it's always worth $1. So it's just sort of like a compatibility format to allow purchases in USD on the blockchain. And that's actually very commonly used. It's not unusual at all to have sales that way. Just to talk about money laundering, which is not super relevant to my work, but the blockchain, anything on the blockchain actually is a really bad way to launder money, because it's fully transparent and all of those transactions are.
But that's now. That's not when it first started.
No, it's always been that way.
It adjusted. It changed over time about like how you can like access those ledgers.
Not sure exactly what you're referring to, but in general, you can see every single transaction and every single transfer of money. So it's actually not at all a good way to launder money.
And I think that one of the sort of answers is this Bored Apes CryptoPunk and I think that this is really where like all the headlines, are distracting from the real artwork being made.
Yeah, let's keep those up as little as possible because they're hideous. Like they're objectively awful to look at. But yeah, this was. I guess we can go to CryptoPunk, so for that would be kind of nicer to look at.
So what's the difference between the two?
So CryptoPunks, this is like kind of the first ever use case for digital ownership on the blockchain. They started out as an experiment in 2017, and basically these two, kind of software developers were playing around with, we can actually put images onto the blockchain and digitally kind of trade them like trading cards. And they were for free. Anyone could have claimed them back in 2017 if you were around there at the right time. And it kind of developed this story. Like, this is something that's been developing for the last 6 years. This is a story that's, relatively speaking, very historically significant when it comes to art on the blockchain. There's actually like provenance associated with these. there's a real kind of cool organic story for their growth and rise to prominence. And I think museums are starting to pay attention. I think if you go to the Pompidou right now, there's one on display. And I think like they're starting to kind of understand this story of, history and, this tech being used as a mechanism for digital ownership. And that's kind of what these represent more than anything. I know they're kind of goofy looking pixelated characters, but there's also this culture that's been developed around them as well. And I think that's also driving quite a bit of value. Like just last weekend, I was actually at a CryptoPunks meetup in Charleston, South Carolina, and 600 people showed up from all over the world to get together and just kind of nerd out over stuff like this, which is really, really cool. Like people are passionate about this, and there's like a real kind of collector base that exists. And from that, people started getting interested in art like Tyler's, generative art, and it's kind of using the same technology that these were kind of built upon. Bored Apes, we'll just kind of spend as little time as possible on those, but they are worth talking about because they kind of stole all these headlines when celebrities started buying them. And I equate them to, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the clothing brand Ed Hardy, like in the early 2000s when they were selling t-shirts for like $800 or some shit like that, and now you can get them at, Ross for like $10 or something. I think that's probably the exact same thing that I think is going to happen with Bored Apes. They were very driven by hype, speculation, kind of crypto culture permeating into this. And I think like they saw all these headlines because they were going for exorbitant prices, but there's really no inherent provenance or story or value. They were spun up in 2021 and they ascended to some crazy price within months of their existence, whereas punks kind of have this kind of longer, slower build up and actually are rooted in history of the blockchain. So I think that's kind of...
Can I talk a little bit about the hype as well? Because these questions are very much tied into the hype.
Yeah.
I think there's a good, so obviously NFTs went through a massive hype cycle, mostly in 2021, and I think there's a really good analogy to be made to the .com bubble of the early 2000s. Right, what happened in the .com bubble was everybody started to realize this is the future. Like e-commerce is the future of how people are going to buy and sell things. Right, like people could tell that things like Amazon were going to come and were going to dominate, and investors, of course, realized that as well and just started to throw money into that space. And they made a lot of unwise decisions, right? Like Pets.com famously was worth a ton of money before it exploded. But after the .com bubble, it's not like e-commerce disappeared forever, right? Mm-hmm. It's just that they were early and they got greedy. And I think the exact same things happened with NFTs. Everybody could see, hey, this is how you're going to collect digital art and a lot of digital goods in the future. It just makes sense. But people got greedy and they threw a lot of money in on questionable things. I think in the same way that e-commerce is still around, NFTs are very much going to continue to be the way that you collect digital art and other digital goods in the future. So,
Laura?
I had heard right after that whole Beeple nonsense, there was a really good episode of Art Dirt on Glass Tire where they were talking about, it was till when Christina Reeves was there, and they were talking about all that hype. But one of the things they talked about was the blockchain technology adding sort of a digital whatever, I don't have the word for it, but you have a lot of performance artists that, that's some of the work that I love to see. And you've got, an old, say, Carolee Schneemann 16 millimeter from the 70s, but you've got other people who are barely paying their bills that if there was a way to add these performances so that if you have a lecture or you're in, an education that somebody like, I'll pull up, we'll watch some Ron Athey, video, and there's a way that there's residual, like with commercials, with SAG, with commercial artists. I remember that was a point they made, and you and I think have even talked about that, because the synapses fired when I heard them talk about that, and I was like, that's genius, because within the art world, a lot of times performance artists are like the least paid.
I've been curious about this exact same thing, and I was going to ask a similar question, so I'm so glad you brought it up. Yeah, when it comes to like collectorship, particularly performance, and other media that have historically been hard to collect.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like this is an interesting opportunity, an interesting avenue. I mean, as a collector, as an artist, as a dealer, like, where do you think, we've talked about the difficulties, like, what are the opportunities, How can this grow from a collectorship standpoint? Because I come from a photography background, and I remember when collectors were still afraid to buy an iris print in the late 90s. They were like, oh my God, it's not a real print, it's not the real thing, and it takes time to, like, get the public and the people with money who are willing to collect over that hump. And I feel like there are certain arenas, particularly performance or lectures, like you said, where this space could really help those artists.
Absolutely.
So I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
As a sculptor, I'm interested, like, if you can digitize it, you can NFT it, right? So right now, there's an ability with, iPhone 14, which has LiDAR in it, to scan a three-dimensional piece, right, and turn it into a 3D model really quickly and, like, effortlessly. And the ability to do that with a large-scale sculpture and turning it into a 3D asset isn't an impossible thing at all. It's very easy, and that could become, kind of an NFT version of the actual sculpture. So I think there's room even not just performance and two-dimensional art and algorithmic art, but also three-dimensional things that we don't imagine could be digitized quite the same way.
Yeah. Just to touch on that a little bit, it's been to me awesome to see that. First of all, photographers are doing very well in the space. Video artists are doing well in the space, which that's a hard medium to sell. Even like poets have been selling poetry NFTs. That's another hard one to sell. I know that's writers, sculptors, dancers, choreographers. The list goes on, and really, it's the limit is your imagination as an artist, and essentially how you make it meaningful for somebody to collect it. And as long as somebody feels that they've meaningfully collected and supported that work in some way, then it can become viable. So I personally love that it's unlocking a lot of these opportunities for artists that historically have had a really hard time selling their work. So.
When you say a poem is collected, I mean, is at the end of the poem it belongs to that new person, or I don't understand. I'm
sure.
I don't get any of this.
Sure. Yeah. So let me. I'll just explain a little bit of the mechanics of what is an NFT real quick. So an NFT is so the blockchain. I'll try not to do a whole huge lecture here. The blockchain is just, like I said, it's a series of transactions.
Just explain it to a 10-year-old.
It's a series of transactions. It says object A is owned by person X. Object B was sold by person X to person Y for $10.
It's as boring as your bank statement, really. That's it. Your bank statement.
It's like a public bank statement. It's a public ledger, and the items on that ledger, they're just records. And so a poem could literally just be the text in the poem and almost nothing else. You could say, a poem, it's by Tyler Hobbs, and this is the text, right? And that's the object that becomes the NFT. And now anybody can, or the owner can sell it to somebody else. Anybody can buy it, right?
How many times can it be bought and sold?
So there's only one copy of it. Typically, you can do editions as well, just like edition prints. But there's only one copy of it, and it could be bought and resold an endless number of times.
Could the artist do, let's say, like when you redo your instructions, the original code, but you jigger it? Could a poem be just write 100 versions with the same text, and then you shuffle them, and then
you could. You could generate 100. Using an algorithm. It's up to the artist, and when the artist is making this work, if they're being honest and transparent, they'll say, this is a series of 100 poems generated from one algorithm, and you can read that algorithm here, or this algorithm stored on the blockchain here.
Do you think, like, I hate to drag in the existential question, but traditionally, and it's this is a brave new world, but art concentrated something about the essence or the thoughts or the attitude or the mission, whatever it was that the artist personally, biologically was doing. And are we just at such early stage with this work that it has a kind of very surface quality right now, like two-dimensional. It's certainly not. I'm not.
It's 72 DPI, basically.
Yeah. Well, so that's my question. It's like, well, what do artists, are they using it to dig into themselves or into problem?
Absolutely.
You know, I haven't met that computer art yet that's doing that, but.
There definitely is. Yeah, you'd have to dig for it a little bit. I think just in the same way that, I don't know, if you picked a random gallery in Austin and went in and looked at the artwork on the walls, that maybe you wouldn't see an artist digging into their own soul that effectively, right? So there's good art and there's bad digital art. There's deep and shallow digital art. It's all the same spectrum. And yeah, some artists are doing a fantastic job of exploring deep and challenging questions, of questioning the technology themselves, questioning the meaning of life, questioning how we're transitioning to a digital world. All these things are part of it.
Like really well-known fine artists that are moving into the NFT space. So like Tom Sachs, I think,
exactly.
Famously a well-regarded sculptor who then has created a very conceptual and interesting set of rockets or something with like logos.
He physically made them too, though, right?
Right.
Yeah, he physically made them, and then he launched them in Central Park, right? So it's not even like you own a thing that was alive for a short period of time. So I think even concept artists are jumping into space. So it doesn't.
Yeah.
I think there's
Loie Halliwell, Tara Donovan,
Damien Hirst as well.
Damien Hirst. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Lorraine.
Thank you, Lisa.
Do you see a future? Do you see a future of not just NFTs but digital art that starts to cross over into the physical world, material science, where it doesn't need to be pixels on glass? LiDAR is a really great example, but it doesn't need to be pixels on glass.
Yeah.
Where you're using a digital algorithm and the output isn't this, but there's a physicality to it. It can be DNA that's grown, it can be bacterial cellulose, it can be fungi, but now you're stepping into a world where you've done a crossover into physicality.
There's also fractional ownership, right? Like you can literally own you can have a painting, and like on a Sono space, it's subdivided in 100 sections, and then say, I own, number D5.
I know, but I'm talking about something different. I'm talking about physicality, where you're literally creating material. And so instead of, right now, digital art is something that you can transmit, digitally. And this you're transmitting digitally, but the receiving is communicating either with, I talked to a DNA lab that would actually produce and like grow bacteria on a wall that starts to look like a painting. But there's physicality to it.
For sure, yeah.
So have you investigated or seen other people starting to play in that, where you start, and it's not working yet, but there is and a lot of the material science is coming out of, I want to build stuff on the moon. It's coming out of construction techniques.
Right.
So have you run across anybody that's playing in that idea space?
I mean, I mentioned a little bit earlier, really big part of my practice, I would say half of my practice is producing physical work from digital ideas. So I use the algorithms as the basis for the creation, but I'm very much
you're the human intervention.
Yeah, the human intervention. I'm the one that's figuring out how to translate that algorithmic idea into something physical.
Right,
and
exactly.
I'm interested in what that transformation does to the work and on all the sorts of differences between the digital world and the physical world. There's tons of fascinating questions there. There's a lot of, I'm just thinking of Deaf Beef. There's an artist who does generative work who's also a blacksmith, and he's like crossing over blacksmithing with generative ideas. There's stained glass. There's people producing ceramics and woven textiles.
Does that require like a digital output technology? Like the ceramics have to be 3D printed, like extruded, or what do we? I guess
They don't have
what's
to
the
be, yeah.
translation? Because I mean, so
Yeah.
we talked about instructions to outcome, right? And there's no
Yeah.
digital necessary as long as you transmit the instructions. A human being on the other side can produce the thing based on
There
instructions.
was an artist that I was speaking to who she's interested in Benin sculptures that were taken and put in a museum, you know, in London somewhere.
British
And
Museum, yeah.
she was right, and she was you know, asking AI to produce the sort of blueprints for these new Benin sculptures that haven't been discovered yet, and then they were being digitally 3D printed. So she was kind of making new Benin sculptures and then taking ownership of those.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say like often there's a mechanical or robotic component to that translation just because a lot of what's interesting about algorithmic designs is a kind of unusual precision and you know, that often doesn't get preserved when you produce it by hand. But if you're working with a machine, it can preserve a lot of that precision. So that's common, but there's definitely artists, including myself, that also just do the translation by hand. Like I've taken digital ideas and then drawn or painted them entirely by hand.
Why?
I'm interested a lot in the types of the mistakes that the hand makes, and the way that the physical world tends to behave is very different from the way that the digital world tends to behave. Like computers like to do things in very clean and straight lines, and of course, if you're a painter or a drawer, you know how hard it is to make a clean and straight line. It just doesn't really happen in the physical world, and so I'm really interested in those differences and exploring them artistically, and we can talk much more about that.
So let's
later,
take a question from Robert.
So Tammy kind of alluded to it in that we all use resources no matter what your medium. But I think we haven't even come close to talking about the resources pulled by NFTs, like the massive computer power it does take to generate an NFT. I'm glad the weather is real nice right now, but we all just endured a terrible summer.
Yeah.
And on the Texas grid, one of the big news stories was Texas paid a miner to not use our electricity.
Yeah,
So
I can talk about this a little bit. Yeah.
Like we're talking about all the utopia, artist accessibility to generate artwork, and generative artwork is great. I love that you're up in the South, so it's all the way. Generative art's just moving fast. That's all I see. Tools that make it happen faster.
Yeah.
NFTs are environmentally irresponsible, and I haven't seen any literature that proves
Yeah.
otherwise.
Can I? Yeah. So
There are,
fortunately,
like corporate, similar to like corporate carbon offset.
So
but that's still happening.
So for Ethereum specifically, which is the main platform, last year there was a change that was introduced that reduced energy consumption by about 99%. It was actually a really big deal. It's called the merge. You can look it up and read about it.
Can you explain that more? What does that mean?
So basically, I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but when Ethereum first started, you sort of you proved that things were true by doing expensive computation, and it's since has switched to a different model called proof of stake, which is basically if you sort of own enough resources in the network, then you're able to say that things are true. This is grossly oversimplified, but essentially it removes expensive computation as the source of proving things. And so, it was, I think, 99 or greater % reduction in energy usage, to the point where somebody did the calculations recently. I think it's like a single tweet is like comparable in energy usage to creating an NFT.
This is one company generating NFTs, right? Aren't there like little millions all over the world doing the same thing?
So Ethereum is you can think of it as a public resource. It's anybody can transact with Ethereum. It's decentralized. Nobody owns it.
That's how
and
you sell the NFT. You have to still generate.
Yeah, you can generate and create an NFT yourself without anybody else's assistance. If you need assistance,
building and the computers, though, right?
Say again.
The buildings and the computers that hold the information, right? That's
I
there's.
can set up my own server and mine NFTs, but I also have to pay the electricity bill for that computer. And that electricity bill.
Yeah. So whenever you right. So whenever you transact with Ethereum, you pay a small fee, and that fee goes to help run the servers. Basically, it gets paid to whoever runs.
So
the servers.
I hate to cut this off because these are all meaningful questions, and this is what I meant by when I started the conversation. This could have gone in a million different directions. We chose to really just introduce some of the ideas, but I encourage you all to, look into this and reach out to these panelists and go on to Discord.
Sometimes these things go till 2 in the morning. You don't have beer. We have wine. These guys want to hang out for a bit.
Wow, it's already 8:40.
Yeah. So, I think that the last question that I'll ask, just to end it, and I'll address this to each of you. If you want to dive into more of these questions that people are asking, you want to get started using AI tools, where do you start? What's next for everybody out here? Just step one.
Step one of what's next for us, or will people
For
just
them.
start? For them.
Yeah. What would you suggest?
I came across this one. I haven't used it, so caveat. It's called Playform, and I think this is interesting because it allows you to upload images, and I don't know what the minimum is, and you create your own data set from which then you can start to do some things, right? So you have, let's say you have a ton of portraits and a ton of landscapes, and your portraits are very pop art and your landscapes are very, moody. You can literally blend these things. You can apply one style to the other. So I think the company has thought about artists, not just people that are engaging with the AI tools for the fun of it, but people that actually do produce their own body of works and see how it can help ideate and generate new stuff. So I think that would be an interesting place to start because you already are probably producing work, so you can upload, 2 bodies of work and combine and mix in different ways. And that's called Playform.
Tyler?
Yeah, I would say one of the AI tools like Stable Diffusion or Midjourney. These are the AI tools where you can literally just type in a text prompt and it'll generate an image for you. So you can say, a picture of mountains and clouds in the style of Salvador Dali, with a rainbow, like whatever you want. And if you haven't actually played with that yourself, it's very, very much worth doing. I think it gives you a lot of insight into all the sorts of quirks and capabilities that these have, and probably gives you a little bit of a glimpse of like how somebody can do it well as well. Just like if you spend a little time painting, you suddenly understand how good some painters are. The same thing is true of these tools.
Yeah, they call it prompt engineering. So if you know art history or graphic design history, whatever your specialty is, if you understand methodologies for sculpture, like add those technical words in there, and I think your outcome will be much more sophisticated than if someone just to put in like in the style of Monet, right? Like if you say in the style of 18th century, you'll get something more like granularly specific. And I think that's where our collective specialty, kind of comes into play to making more sophisticated prompts.
So Matt, and I'll frame this a little differently for you. If somebody wanted to look into collecting or look into just, where do they start?
I mean, it sounds really stupid, but yeah, the internet. But honestly, I think it's kind of whatever you're interested. Like, I think your curiosity will kind of lead you, and I would say just keep an open mind.
Maybe like Super Rare. Or
like Super Rare is one place, but or even on the Artblocks websites, you can at least artblocks.io. That's kind of where Tyler's launched his first project on Ethereum, and you can kind of at least get a sense for what styles of generative art are out there, and then maybe if one artist catches your interest, Google them, look them up on Twitter, and kind of just start diving down that rabbit hole. And I would say, like, as it pertains to AI, and any of this kind of stuff is like the real key thing is like keep an open mind and look at where your information that you're getting is coming from. I think a lot of times, you know, people may feel threatened by like some new technology or some new innovation that may be like existential threat to them, and they may put out some information that is, you know, defamatory towards some sort of innovation that's happening. Like when I first looked at these, you know, I thought they were just stupid pixel images too, but then once I understood technological innovation that's coming on behind this, you start to gain more of an appreciation for it. And I would also recommend just playing around with ChatGPT. Like the monotonous parts of my job that I fucking hate, like putting together memos and reports. I know I'm spending so much less time on it just because I'm, you know, getting familiar with these tools and having it like, you know, make my work more efficient.
So thank you all for listening. Thank you to the panelists for all your time. Lastly, I'll just say, you know, really think about Gutterblood, think about this event, think about the community that it builds, and think about using your money to support future iterations of Gutterblood. There are so many more conversations, even sort of nested in this one conversation, that could be had, that would be really beneficial to everybody, but it's not free.
Yay!